everyone. Thanks for joining. Can someone raise their hand if you can hear me okay? Just want to make sure the audio is working. Thank you very much. Not very many people have joined today. Maybe I drove everyone away last week. So we'll see if a few more people tag in and then we'll get going. Okay, I guess we'll kick it off. Just a couple items. There was a question that came up last week regarding entering questions. In the GoToWebinar control panel, there is a little area that says questions. If you click the little arrow next to the questions in the gray area, that will expand and you can type questions in there. When you type those questions, I'm able to see those, as well as I get a spreadsheet after the fact with all the questions, and that's how I put together my document that I'll be sending out after today's session. So, again, this is our second session dealing with the credit collections side. Let's move this out of the way a little bit for me. And just, some of the things that, we've gone through up to this point. We've talked about some of the customer classifications and how that is used in a typical process today using the age of debt or the trial balance reports. And then how we can use a new classification that is only for the accounting group, which is kind of a nice to have, but it allows you to set up your customers in categories that are only used by you, so you don't have to kind of say, well, I want some of these and some of these because the sales team, for example, is using the line of business code for something different. But anyway, using that kind of classification works with the credit control list maintenance. And I'll step through these screens really quick again. And then the credit control list is where we build our to-do list. So after we start doing the maintenance and it starts taking a life of its own as we're entering our collection calls and things like that, the follow-up activities go to the control list, which is your to-do list. Here are your activities. And then we'll step through some collection notes and stuff like that as we're going forward. I will send out this document, this PDF, along with those. There are a couple new general codes that we would need to set up. So when we're logging a collection call, we have the ability to flag the reason for the call and then also categorize the results of the call. Okay, so there's two new control type and control codes. And the maintenance is as simple as that. We call it something, and it's for populating the drop-down list as well as reporting purposes and things like that. In the customer file maintenance, there are a couple of new fields that we will use in the custom fields tab of customer file maintenance. The credit control, as I've got it labeled here, again, these are configurable to be called whatever you want them to be called. But it allows us to go in and classify our customers. So when we build our control list, we can say, who do we want to look at? One of the questions that came up is, can I have something that recurs every Friday? Well, some people do put in, these are my Friday calls. So maybe it's a weekly guy who buys from you all the time and on Fridays wants, a summary of the week. Well, maybe you just go in, put in Friday, create a new list, and those are your Friday calls. So again, that credit control field is for your use. That credit analysis is if you were to use the ability to start generating collection letters and things like that out of the system, and we'll step through that today. So now I've got some screenshots dealing with the control lists and stuff like that. So I'm going to exit the PowerPoint here and we're going to go to the live system instead. And I just want to step through quickly some of these things again, because we're going to, it's kind of a story. We kind of build upon what we've talked about. So the big portion of last week that we discussed is this credit control call maintenance. And again, menus are configurable. They're called, whatever we want to call them. We have our operator code. The operator code has to be assigned to a credit department. The types of lists, again, are whatever we call on the customer side. And you can display those that are, I only want to call those guys the friendly reminder calls, the guys that are overdue, so they're not so friendly calls, or I'm just going to go off total outstanding payment. When you are working a list, you can save that list and come back to it. So say, for example, you start working, you're doing your regular calls. On Monday morning, you create a list and you start working them. As you start building and making any kind of adjustments like that, maybe, for example, I call this guy here, I'm done with him. So I can go ahead and I can remove him from that list. All right. All he's doing is removing him from my display. And I say, yep, I'm already done with him. So I can work this list as I'm, working out my calls, right? So you have another one who you're going to call next week. Well, as soon as you're done with him, you can go ahead, remove him from this list. He'll be on your to-do list based on what we talked about last week. I'm going to pop open that in just a second. As I'm going through and I'm working this in, I mean, this might be, a week's worth of work that you're, processing, this list. It's the start of the month, you're working it through. Instead of hitting new list, you would just go in and hit retrieve, okay? Or I'm sorry, recall. So what that does, it brings up the list that is saved for you. It's saved by your operator. This new list will simply go out there and give you a new display based on the current activity in the database, okay? So if I were to refresh my list again, that guy that I just removed, he doesn't remove him as he's never going to come back again. He's going to come back because nothing has changed. He still has a balance and he's going to come up on my list again, okay? And the big thing for doing the collection calls, I'm not going to step through all the buttons again, but just as a little bit of a reminder, this new, this add button here opens this window here that allows me to see his balance, allows me to see, his invoices and things like that. I can jump into the AR inquiry right from the screen. So I can drive all the way down through to see everything that's going on, account by account by account. One of the questions was, can I see, like their year to dates and things like that? Well, I can't change that first screen, but what I can do is from here, I can drive into the sales screen, which shows me all my sales activities. So I can have my customer there. I can do a start date. So if I only want to see this year, this month, whatever it happens to be, all the different filtering at the top. But you can see all the detail associated with that. So you can drill into that detail from within the collection screen. The idea is when you're making the calls, something might be a click or two away, but to have it at your fingertips when you're on the phone and you're having a discussion with that person, so you can kind of, keep the money flowing. Okay. Now, as hopefully you remember, when you go in and you set up a follow-up, you can set a next call date. You can manually enter that, or you can go in and say, have the system say, based on the action code, to generate a follow-up for 7 days from now, for example. So you can have this credit control call list as a menu option, okay? This also exists as a button option inside the credit maintenance screen. They both go to the same spot, just showing you that you can get it from a couple different spots. And what this really is your to-do list. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to jump in here. You can see it defaults to today's date and the current time, which is my current demo system time. And I see the line items that I have entered. These are the ones that have a follow-up up through today's date. All right, so these are the ones, you know, maybe I had someone from 2 days ago that I didn't get a hold of, right? And maybe I just didn't update a new note. I just kind of left them there. So, you know, I just kept going, okay? If I wanted to go through and take a look at, you know, future things, I could go in there and put in a future date. And one of the issues that came up last week was entering a date format. If you notice, I'm just doing 10/1 for October 1st. Because I've got a parameter set that says I'm using kind of US date format, when I tab off that, see how it flips? Let's see, do I have anybody else? Oh, I guess I don't have anybody else on there. Okay. But what this allows me to go in and do is actually take a look in the future. It defaults to the current date. So, you know, I have that, that activity, okay? So if I go in and I take a look at a particular line item and I double click on that, it brings up the screen so I can see what was done. Okay, this is my last phone call. You know, what happened with that. I may come in, let's see, I have someone who's got anything more fun? No. If now I'm making a subsequent call, right? So this is my first call, or my first call to that guy was, you know, I called and did a collection call. If we just have this highlighted and I'm going to click new call here, it's going to bring open my screen, the same one that we saw before. And so, you know, I'm talking to Mike. What is my reason for the phone call? Well, I'm still doing a collection call and, you know, check is in the mail, whatever. Maybe I'm going to do a follow-up on that. Now notice how that filled in a date and time for me a couple days in advance. And then I can put something in here with oops. Wow, I can't type today. You know, whatever type of information that we want to go in here. So now I have a follow-up set for September 29th. I hit OK. Now, if my date here, if you notice, is September 29th. The reason he's still displaying is because I went ahead and just adjusted my date to October 1st. So he's still there. If instead I left that default to the current date, if you notice, he's not there because I don't have an action I need to take for this guy. He's, you know, out there in the future when September 29th rolls around, he's going to come back up on my screen as, you know, a new follow-up. So again, this is your to-do list. So the idea here is you can go ahead and you can drill into a transaction. And so, you know, you made your first contact with this person and then you made another contact and another contact. And every time that you make a collection call from here and you just kind of hit that new item on here, it's a new phone call. It kind of builds a chain associated with the prior call, right? Because again, I can drill into the detail, okay? I can see what I wrote last time, and now I'm calling to follow up on it. So all I simply do is come here, hit new call, and it links these calls together. So now I have a kind of a chain of everything that's gone on with this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump forward just to bring back open that this guy again. Okay. So here's the note that I just put on here. And if I am done with this, yep, he promised to send a check and it actually came in. I can simply come in here and, I talk to Mike, whatever it happens to be. But everything that we're doing is revolving around getting money, right? So as soon as this chain of conversations, however long it might be, hopefully it's one phone call and, you get the check. But this allows me to come in and say, yep, I got your payment. Oops. Whatever. I got the money. All right. So now he has disappeared from my screen. And again, so the idea here is it allows you to kind of build a chain. I'm going to show you where you can see the chain of events in just a minute. Right. So, there's the mechanics of using the screens is very simple. It's very straightforward. There's not a lot of a big learning curve associated with this. It's simply, what did I talk about and what is my next step? So when you get they promise to send a check, and then you call back and they go, oops, I forgot to put a stamp on the envelope. All right. Oh, I forgot to sign the check. Sorry. The dog ate my homework. Whatever excuse they're going to provide for kicking the can down the road a little bit more, you can go in and you can track all of that. And again, this is a nice communication device because, I don't want to kind of pick on anybody, but it's easy to pick on the sales side. But the sales guy always thinks everybody's great and everyone's always going to pay their bill and they're never going to be a problem for anybody in the accounting side. Right? Well, maybe, you're having an issue with the customer and the customer complains to the rep. Well, you have your backup here. You're not sitting here saying, oh yeah, I kind of remember that I spoke to him last month and he was, we had this issue. Well, now it's documented. It's documented at the time that it occurred, and everything is kind of tracked within the system. So it's easy to go in and make decisions on that customer. Is he going to go on hold? Is he going to get he always pays his bill and life is great. I have to make the phone call, but he calls and he promises me the check and he pays his whole balance every single time. Awesome, right? Well, when he wants a boost in his credit limit, well, he's probably going to get it as opposed to the guy who always forgets to sign the check. Those type of things. You don't misplace Post-it notes, those type things. So again, when you're going in and you're making kind of this chain of events, if you will, where you see that is back under my credit control maintenance. So these screens here are really kind of geared toward it's the function and the inquiry side kind of rolled together. So this has two different tabs, and I've been kind of avoiding this inquiries tab a little bit till now. When I come over to the inquiries tab up at the top, it allows me to go in and drill into some specifics. Again, there's going to be a grid that displays down here. Well, what am I looking for? So you can search account types and operators. So I can bring up a specific account. I can group the search results, the same thing. Select an operator. I only want to see those activities that I've done. I don't want to see things back to the beginning of time. I only want to look at this year, this quarter, whatever it happens to be. So you can do date ranges. Maybe it's something where you need to go back and do research from a year ago, right? So maybe you can go back and, rather than wading through all kinds of notes, you can see that. Do I want detail or summary level? All calls outstanding, completed, blah, 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 as well as your branch code. So if I simply hit display, this goes out and it starts, all my little listings of everybody that's sitting out here, right? So here's all my notes. Well, we kind of picked on my friend Rudy over here. He's my F200 guy, or F250. So let's just go ahead and just filter down on this guy because he's got a lot of different notes, but he's got everything set up. I didn't close anything up for this guy. I'm going to open him back up. I thought I had done that, but we're going to just kind of pick on it this way. So you can see this completion flag allows me to go in there and see what kind of activities are done, not done, and things like that. If I change my display to summary, okay, all you're doing is getting a count of those notes that are entered into the system, all right? So you can sit here, you know, the onesie, twosie, okay, you know, this is a quick little eyeball that says, hey, this guy's probably not that much of an issue. This guy is kind of an issue, all right? So again, it's communication-wise, it's a quick way to kind of take a look at this stuff. If I go in and I want to click on an item such as this, and I'm going to hit my expand button here, what this does then is give me that chain that I was talking about. So I can go in and say, I called him again, he promised to send me money, et cetera, all the way up through I got my payment, okay? So all of these here are all filtered together underneath the initial collection call, the initial activity that started this chain. Now you might have a customer out there that has a lot of little chains all over the place. Every month you have to call them and it starts a new chain every single time until the 20th of the month you finally get the check that was due, you know, on the 1st, whatever. But this allows you to go in every time that you do that to-do list and you hit new call to that, it just gives you another link in that chain all the way up through completion. Okay. So again, that gives you the ability to take a look at what each individual process happens. And maybe you're just going based off, I'm going to take a look at a date and I want to see what my most recent activity, my most recent chain of calls happens to be. All right. So clicking on any particular line item takes you into the detail. Again, you may have more written in here, more detail associated than I put in my little demo system here, but it gives you that view. All right, so how much information you have and the detail that you put there, you know, all that can do is help. Okay. So regarding the collection, call maintenance, and things like that, these two guys right here work hand in hand. And again, this credit control call list can be a button off of here. We don't have any alert that jumps out and says, here's your calls to do. It's up to, you know, you have to go in there and say, yes, this is, I want to see my to-do list. And again, it defaults to today's date when you first go in there, but you can go in there and expand that and, you know, see more dates, see fewer dates, whatever, you know, kind of makes sense for you. All right. So a couple other items that are related to this is putting in collection notes, not to be confused with collection notes. Okay. I'm assuming there's laughter out there. So we have collection notes that are used if your, you know, drivers are going out there and you want to give them a document to take along with them to say, hey, you know, I need to bring a check back to AR, and they told me, you know, you're going to give it to me. So along with the invoices, packing slips, whatever documents that your driver is bringing out there with the parts, they can have a document that says, I'm here to collect money. So this type of collection note allows me to put in a customer, or if you notice, this can be a vendor. You know, I'm driving by this and I want to pick up, you know, parts from a vendor or something like that. But because we're talking about doing collections, you can put in something like this and say, see Rudy, you know, something as simple as that. So now when he gets there, again, the driver now has a document that says, hey, can I talk to Rudy? Because he's supposed to give me a check for $500 that I need to bring back to AR. Okay, so it assigns it its own document number. You can have a copy of it. Again, these copies are written through the Autopart document designer, okay? So whatever you want them to look like, have your logos, all that stuff on there. And so you can go print a copy, et cetera, et cetera. If you notice behind here, you know, I don't have parts or anything like that, and its status is incomplete. It's an open item. Now, this collection note, people, you know, if people are using that, people will use this also for collecting parts. So it's the same screens that someone goes in there and says, okay, I've got a bunch of core to pick up. Or maybe a customer who did not place an order says, hey, I've got this stuff piled up in the corner, I need you to come get it. And you may send a driver over there, not to deliver any parts, but maybe they're picking something up, okay? So these collection notes can work that way as well, okay? And what ends up happening at this point is now when I want to take a look at anything that's outstanding, you know, again, this is not a document. This does not touch accounts receivable. This is just a communication device between a driver and a customer, in my scenario here, that says, hey, you know, I need to see Rudy and I'm supposed to pick up a check, right? So when that comes back in, you know, and again, the screens function just like everything else. I'm just here on my log number, it assigns a log number. When I hit search, I have my list of my open checks for me, okay? What I'm expecting to see. I bring that up. This is what we just did. There's my status. It's in my collection note side. Yep, I got my check. And this is simply a way of saying, yes, I went ahead, I marked this as complete, the monies are there. This does nothing with accounts receivable. It does nothing with changing their outstanding AR or anything like that. You still have to process the money as you normally would, but this is just a device to go in and keep track of someone was going out to pick up money, okay? You'd still go back through doing cash posting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Let me jump over here quick. Close all my millions of windows down. Just a couple of questions. There's, I don't know if you can see the little question panel on my display here that I have open on the screen. Can the email address be included in the credit control list? The credit control list screen is actually a program that does not have a back-end spec. There are a lot of screens inside Autopart that allows for configuration and changing items on there. This does not happen to be one of those. Can the collection note print out as an invoice would? Yes, it can. So you define where you want a document to go, and you know, you may want that to always print on the same printer, for example, as a regular invoices, so they can be, you know, processed together. I would assume you would want a different looking format so that the driver doesn't accidentally just kind of include it. They know that, you know, this is a collection note that, you know, they might want to do something different with. And is the collection notes only in Autopart? You don't have it on the ledger screen. It is something, the Autopart screens and the ledger screens all come from the same spot. They're all configurable. So we can just throw a support ticket in for that, and they can go in and add it to your screens. We have some accounts where they don't have a ledger's login at all. All of the ledger's options that you typically see are just included in the regular Autopart screens. So anything that exists on an Autopart screen can exist on the ledger screen and the other way around. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to take the next step on the customer side. You know, we talked about that list code that allows me to go in and categorize my credit control call maintenance items. Then there was another option that is used infrequently, but it is available, so I want to put that out there. and it is for putting together call letters, okay? And what that allows is this particular screen here to say, here are the customers that I want to send a letter to, all right? So you can see the filtering at the top, all customers, customers over credit limit, on stop, exceeding terms. They've already had a letter, meaning I'm going to send them a next letter. You know, the first letter is, you know, so sorry we missed you, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then the next letter might be not quite so nice. You can see the different categories, you know, balance in particular months. You can put in dates, codes, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it's, you know, your weekly guys you want to do different than your monthly guys. Maybe you only want to send it to certain people with certain terms. So maybe, you know, if they're net 10, well, then you're going to go in and you're going to send them a letter, you know, when they're late at that point. But you may have different time periods that you want to, you know, send to customers. So I'm going to do this just easy. I'm just going to grab the customers that I've already gone ahead and sent them a letter. And it displays my details here on the screen. All right. So what this allows me to do is say, these are my customers based on the criteria entered at the top. I can see what their credit limit is, what their credit balance is, if they're over their terms, you know, and what their balance is and stuff like that. Okay. And then you might want to go in and say, I want to take this information and I want to go ahead and generate mailings, right? So, you know, the simple way that we go ahead and do that is I say, I'm going to update this. And if you notice, it jumps out there and it says, where do I want to save this document? It's going to go in and write a document out for me. So I'm just going to call it that overdue file. And it just wrote that content out to that file. Now, what that allows me to do then is take that file and import that in through Word and generate the appropriate letter. All right. So I'm going to jump back onto my desktop here. Minimize some of my stuff over here. And you end up with something like this. So this was basically what it had on the screen. So I've got the account, the name, address, information, stuff like that. You've got your balances, what's overdue, what the dates are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all their cumulative information. And the idea is now you can take this, right? Now, you know, it's probably going to be more than a dozen lines long. You know, you're going to go in and you want to send out quickly a series of letters, for example. So you can, let's just do this. So I just have a blank Word document here. And what I mean, these are not auto part options, but it's, you know, what you can use. I may come in under my mailings. I'm going to say I'm going to start mail merge. Okay. And I'm just going to use the wizard. All right. So I want to go in, I want to create a letter. You want to create the envelope. So you're going to take the same file and you're going to create letters and envelopes. I'm assuming, you know, if you're mailing these items out, right? So I'm going to start a document, you know, do I want to use current document, a template, or an existing document? So you can go in, you can save these items. But we're just going to show you just real quick, creating these. I'm going to use a list that I've already saved, right? You just saw me go in and create that overdue list. And so what I'm going to do, come to my file, okay. And now that gives me, in my mail merge screen, my detail is what's there. Now, what this allows you to do is you can make, you know, adjustments. Maybe you don't want to include some guys and stuff like that, you know, so you can still go in and make, you know, modifications and things like that at that point, all right? And we're going to go ahead, we're going to write our letter. So we might come in and do something like, you know, dear, and then what do I want to go in and, you know, do? I can say, I'm going to throw their name there, okay? So now that is going to simply take my spreadsheet and it's going to throw their name there, you know? And then you're going to go in and put in whatever, you know, details you want to, you know, thank you for your okay, be as nice as you want to or not nice, you know. And you might want to have something like this where I'm going to show them credit limit. You know, and again, you know, you got all your address, current month, you know, your periods that are due, your cumulative totals, et cetera, et cetera. So you might put in whatever kind of detail you want to associated with this. And then when you go ahead and you save this, then you can generate the letters, and obviously these items that I'm, you know, using these wildcards for are going in and it's pulling that from the spreadsheet. So then you can go ahead and generate your documents and you'll end up with, not that, but you'll end up with something like that, you know, thank you for your service, blah, 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 blah. So here's, you know, their balance, et cetera, you know. And there's the next one and the next one and the next one. And, you know, it's a simple way of going in and generating a bunch of letters, you know, documents. So even MailMerge is just a Word item. So I don't know if you use that on other items, but it's a way of taking the Autopart data, feeding it in, and you can use that to assist with some collections and things like that. And likewise, if you are mailing those, well, then generate your envelopes as well, and your envelopes will have the exact same, you know, sequence and everything like that as the letters. So it's pretty easy to kind of stuff those. Again, if you are going in and doing that kind of process. Okay. So this credit letter analysis, again, allows me to go in and generate those, the details of the, you know, the letters that I'm sending out there and stuff like that. But what it also keeps track of under the customer file maintenance screen, it keeps track of the letters that we've sent. So as we're generating those documents and we go in and say, I'm doing that update, it's just keeping track of a counter that's saying, yes, you sent them a letter, you sent them another letter. So again, from a communication perspective, from the follow-up perspective and things like that, you're going to see, I'm calling this guy all the time, you know, those type things. So, you know, I mean, there can be, you know, it's valuable information to have. And again, if you do it inside Autopart, as opposed to on a piece of paper, or, you know, everybody uses Excel for everything, but I've seen plenty of times where, you know, you have like a Google Drive and you put out a spreadsheet so multiple people can go in and say, oh yeah, I have to keep calling, I have to keep calling. Well, you know, that's one method and it does work, but this puts it inside of Autopart itself. So it's right there with the customer account, and its updates are happening for you. You're not, you know, relying on, oh yeah, I got to remember to go in and update this other document, for example. Okay. So that is one of the options of going in and using this credit letter document. We have some additional follow-up items that we can use. We have this feedback module. that can be, it's used in conjunction with AMail. I don't know if people are using AMail, but it does allow you to have alerts populate and display multiple areas within the system. So if I simply come in here, and this screen here gives me, my open procedure feedback modules. Okay, these are the ones that are flagged as incomplete. But this allows me to, again, create a new task, if you will. So we're going to pick on Rudy here. By the way, names and everything changed. These aren't real people. These are my pretend things. So I'm sorry if there's a Rudy guy out there. Don't mean to offend. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and to protect me. So anyway, I might go along here and I put in my account, Rudy, my branch, who I am. My operator code is just my SY initials, the date, my department, okay, my credit control department that we've talked about before. And you might put something. Etc. Whatever you want to put in there. All right, and that's all fine and good, but then what do you do with that? Well, if you notice down here, it says, who do I want to assign it to? So I can have the head office also be kind of flagged on things, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this to my other operator code, my SWY as opposed to SY. My SY operator code, I have linked to my accounting type activities, where my SWY is more of my operations operator code. So I might say, all right, whatever you want to put in there. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK or update. And so this created a new procedure feedback module log for me. And I say, OK, thank you very much. And he is now, tracked within Autopart. So now what I'm going to do here is I am going to open up my Autopart screen, which I'm logged in here as SWY. And if you see here, I have unread messages. And if I log into here, well, here's what I just did. All right. So I have a procedure feedback log. Okay. My feedback module here is set to this. All right. So it's alerting me that I should go into the procedure feedback module and follow up on a particular activity. So as the sales rep or whoever this might be assigned to, right, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to my feedback module, and where's this guy here? All right, so here's the message, and now down here I've got my response, and so now my response is going to be, okay, again, whatever communication we're going to put here, and now I want to send this back to me. All right, again, pretend I'm changing hats as I'm doing this. So now I'm changing that from my SWY over to my SY. And I go ahead and hit update. And now what I'm going to do is changing hats again and again. I have AMail messages and things like that that can be popping up. I can have, here's my unread. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this back open. Here's my message. All right. So, now it's keeping track of, that communication. And now maybe I'm just going to say, thank you, blah, blah, blah. and I'm going to complete this. So very similar to the call list, this procedure feedback module, and again, this can be used for other things than the accounting process, but I'm discussing it with that in mind here. But this can be used on the operations side. For example, you need a rep to follow up on something else, et cetera, et cetera. But this keeps a chain of events as I'm passing it between people. Maybe I sent this to one rep to take care of, and the rep says, you know what, I don't deal with this account anymore. I transferred it to that account, and they would simply go in and change the operator code assigned to over to the next person, and anything that they write in here will just keep getting appended in this actions box. So here, I started the conversation, then it went over to someone else to follow up, and then it came back to me with the action that was done. I'm saying, great, thank you, I'm completing that. And it's completing my message, thank you for sharing. What I can do here is I'm going to change that to complete. And when I double click on that, I can see all my activities on here, okay? So again, there it is. I said thank you, and it's completed by me. So anything that you want to do, again, you can keep track of that activity. So there's a lot of areas inside Autopart that allows you to go in there and do this type of tracking and logging the activity steps as we're moving forward. That's the positive thing of doing something within the system. The people that have the security to view this information will have that at their fingertips, and they can see activities that are going on. Will you send a PowerPoint or a Word doc of this? And yes. So after this call, I will take the questions that I'm receiving here, and I update a Word doc with all the questions and my answers to those. I include screenshots in there. It might be overkill, but just again for communication purposes, so I don't want to say one thing and in someone else's mind they're thinking of a different screen. So if I do a screenshot, hopefully that's we'll make sure we're talking the same thing. And I will follow up with that and send that out probably sometime mid next week. I'll have that put together, as well as my PowerPoint with just the regular flow of items. All right. So for activities, the normal processing and things like that, those are kind of the main things that are inside Autopart along those lines. But as we're tracking this information, now we want to go in and, there's more things that you can do with it. Where are these type of things visible and things like that? The AR account inquiry is, aside from cash posting, this is probably, a tie for the most important screen in accounts receivable land. But this also allows you to have visibility to those notes, and those notes can include the credit control, okay? So as you're talking with a customer and you're looking in your accounts receivable inquiry, if you are using your the credit control functions that we've been talking about, this allows you to jump in there and say, look, I sent them another letter. Come on, pay your bill. Those type of things. So on top of that, the filters, maybe you only want to see those things that came from the credit collection side. Okay. I can drill into the details. Okay, so this is just a follow-up note. So it allows you to go in and see all of that information. So the account inquiry is a great way of going in while you're dealing with a customer, not just seeing activity that's there, but seeing the communication that's gone back and forth, not necessarily just with you, but with other people in the department or anyone else who's keeping track of notes. So, Some organizations are awesome with keeping track of notes, and some of them, the people on the counter, it's a battlefield, and they don't have time to put notes in, or, they're just slammed with accounts, especially, retail situation. So again, your organizations, what would work, would not work. I'm just throwing options out there for you. All right. Some other inquiries, batch inquiry. It's a nice way to go in and see everything that's gone on associated with, every kind of transaction and things like that. Transaction types, are kind of nice. If I'm only looking for invoices, credits, cash posting, discounts, open balances, journal entries, debit notes, etc., like that. The journal entries, it's kind of nice, especially if you have customers that are also vendors, so when you want to net out those balances, so as a customer, they owe you $1,000. As a vendor, you owe them $2,000. So you want to net those together and you do the journal entry, so you can go in and you can see that type of activity and things like that. Transaction wise, if you have an invoice, I wrote down an invoice earlier. If you want to go in and you want to see what the distribution, of a particular invoice is, what did it hit, it's our core cost of sales, stuff like that. Obviously, what credit notes inquiries are. The customer information screen is kind of nice as well. I don't know if people have this turned on or not. The top section just gives you some customer details. The information box gives you, different activities, which can be changed through the settings option at the bottom. But you can see, a whole lot of information associated with a particular account. How far back do you want it to go? And guess what? Notes. So another place where you can go in there and you can see the notes linked to a particular account and, see all that detail. Communication, right? For those type of activities that you want to see here, the detail, the settings option gives you the ability to see what you want to have in there. So this provides what you have in the display, the detail of what you want to have on the screen at the top here, because if you're using this and you want to contact customers, well, it's great to have, the names and the phone numbers displayed on the screen and stuff like that. So that's nice to have. So you can add that detail onto the grid. And of course, we know what the invoice inquiry is. And it's just, oh, I've got nothing for today. I was kind of a slacker. Okay, so you can see, your invoice activity and stuff on here. If you notice, the grid, this is one of those places where we do have a spec that we can change the details of what displays in the grid. And one thing that I was kind of surprised, a lot of people don't know, that I can have invoices and credits display on the same screen. So we used to have to go to the credit inquiry when you wanted to take a look at the credits, and you go to the invoice inquiry when you wanted to see credits. Well, I can say from here, I can have just one screen that say, just show me credits, or show me credits and invoices on the same screen. And of course, I didn't do any credits. Let's back this up a little bit more, see if I can get lucky. Well, you know what a credit looks like. Oh, there I got a couple of credits. Okay. So you can have credits display on the same grid. It's kind of nice to have. And again, you can filter by those. You still have all of the filtering options over here on the side, so you can see what's actually there. You do still have the ability for the multi-select if you were going to go in and you wanted to email a bunch of documents, for example, to a customer, all that stuff. Okay. Another area that is important, there are reports, whereas we try and do a lot of things with inquiries and say, do things on the screen. Well, we do obviously give you the ability to do reports and print reports. You can print reports to the screen, if, that's just simply usable on the screen. But there are plenty of people that like to have the document in front of them and they like to put notes on there. And again, I'm not trying to take any document away from anybody, but just, so you might have these type of things out there. So these are just written through the normal, the age of debt report is a programmed report, and the content and the details of what displays on there can be adjusted. And again, just so you know that that exists under the accounts receivable parameter file maintenance option. The print options tab has a bunch of different items that you can turn on and off that are only focused with the age of debt report. So what do you wish to see or not see? And you can simply toggle these things on and off. With security, you have the option to go in and do that yourself. So you can customize that age of debt report to what works for you within your organization. We've been talking a lot about doing, customer notes and collection notes. And again, collection notes, not to be confused with collection notes. But this is just a report that I, put together. And again, there was a question last time about dates not working. So if this doesn't work for you, if you notice, I'm just putting in, January 1. Okay, when I tab off that, it converts to the format that it wants. So I can do this very simply. Again, it defaults to current year. So, when it comes, the year rolls and we finally get rid of 2020, then you can, you got to be careful to put in the year if you want the prior year's information. Right? And so these are just filters that I've put on there. And this is going out there. Who put the note in? What type of note? Where did it come from? You can see my different kind of codes associated with that. And, you have all the report grid functions that you might want to do. And look, here's Rudy, we keep putting him on here, send me money, send me money, send me money, those type things. So this is a way where, you might generate a report like this because you want to go in and not just see a particular account. When you're going in and you're doing an inquiry, that's fine and good when you're starting from the customer perspective. But if you want to see overall activity, something like this gives you overall activity. You saw I had date ranges in there. Again, it's my demonstration system, so I don't have a lot of activity going on, but it allows me to go in there and say, I only want to see what happened in the last week, for example. And you can then get an overview of that. And then maybe you take that and drill into a particular inquiry to see more detail. Maybe, for example, I want to go in and, from the credit collections perspective, I might want to only see those notes that came from my credit collections. So I have that in there as a filter. And now I'm seeing that information. Okay. So all I'm trying to get across here is this gives you the ability to generate reports. All the customer notes are stored in the database. So, you can use the BTR generator, which is all this was done with, to create a report that makes sense for you, what works for your organization. Okay. Other items that, kind of makes sense for review purposes. Your finance charges, who did you charge finances charges to and who you're going to write off and stuff like that. So, you have that type of information. Another thing that might be useful, the payment audit report. Let's jump back here. I'm not going to do this wide open here, but maybe when you have a discussion going on with a customer, how many times are you doing a collection call and they say, well, I sent you a check for X. What did you apply that to? And then you go into the AR account inquiry screen and you drill in and you say, I paid these with it. And they go, okay, well, what about? And they keep kind of jumping around. Well, maybe something like this, maybe this is something that you want to provide to the customer. Maybe putting some of the work on your customer. If they go in and say, I don't think you posted all my checks, well, if I go back into a period for my particular customer, now I can say, I have a payment of $1,229.17, $1,339.81, blah, blah, blah. And you can see over here what I paid, what my totalers happen to be, how much was applied in your account. Oh, and by the way, just customer, you can see that I also included this credit here for $147.71, and I applied that within that batch. So if this is a customer that wants to step through their own detail, you can see that. And there's different sorting methods and things like that. But this might be a useful tool where you might want to provide to your customer how they kind of paid. So not just for you, this might be something for them. Okay. Make them do a little bit of work. All right. I like the transaction audit report, again, because that goes through and it kind of gives you everything in the world that's, gone on with this. And so you can see I've got a bunch of credits over here. You can include the general ledger distribution associated with those, all right? So you can see that I hit sales, cost of goods, my inventory, and obviously my AR is the reverse side to that. So you can see all the different steps associated with that. And again, this gives you the different kinds of categories that you're looking at. So if I'm only concerned about credits, or you're only concerned about those journal entries that I was talking about, so maybe, your customer that is set up as a customer and a vendor, all right? And they're going, well, from the vendor side, they're calling you and saying, you shorted me. You were supposed to send me, this. And if you went in and did that journal entry process of tying an AR account to an AP account, you might come in and say, well, I did my contra posting on here, so this 4141 that we're talking about, I took that out of my AR side. And on the AP side, I'd be crediting the AR account, I'd be debiting the AP account, and the batch entry has got those both sides. So what would end up happening is on the payment side, when you go, assuming that the vendor amount was greater than the AR amount, if I write off the entire AR amount and then I want to reduce the payment amount, that just shows as a credit that you're taking when you go into the disbursement process. Okay. You might end up with something like that. Okay. So your AR account was credited for this amount and your AP amount, so your AR for that particular customer is what got credited, and your AP amount to, presumably it would be, you know, the same vendor customer, but it would be netted out that way. Okay. And then, you know, what ends up happening, you know, the posting and stuff like that gets netted that way. You know, I just think there's a lot of good information that can display. And you have, you know, different sortation methods and stuff like that. You know, and what you're looking for. You may want to have foreign currency. So if you have foreign currency items on here, you know, you've got a customer that's over the border one way or the other, you may go in and say, let me see theirs, or maybe you want to have both display so you can see based on the general codes conversion factor for currency, you know, the value in the local currency as well as whatever that customer's local currency happens to be. Okay. So there's some tools in here, you know, the type of things that, you know, we've kind of gone through. Those are kind of the topics that I wanted to address during, you know, this session. But, you know, where we started was just kind of going in and talking about the typical process that I've seen over the years and years and years that I've been around. A lot of people will use the age of debt report or the age trial balance, whatever you want to call it, and they'll use that for doing collection calls, right? Which is fine. And again, the report's not going away. But then what we did is we kind of tried to take that the next step using the credit control call maintenance. And again, allowing you to go in there and start logging activities within the system. And because the detail is there, because, you know, if you start building, you know, this process and with follow-up dates and things like that, the system can help you generate that next contact point, right? So you know that you've got to make another phone call, and as opposed to, you know, like I've seen people go into Outlook and say, just put little reminders all over their calendar. And when you look at the calendar of someone who's doing these kind of collection calls, it looks like these people are crazy because they just have a bazillion events logged all over the place. Well, you know, this is now part of the system, so you don't have to jump out and remind yourself to do this in something else. All you have to do here is hit that call list, and it will display what your to-do list is. So it kind of takes the place of that. You know, and some of these activities, you know, are really based on your market, right? You know, there are things where if it is just crazy transaction wise and stuff like that, you know, you're making those quick phone calls, you're making the, you know, I have my favorite AR story that I'm sure everyone has heard, or most of you have heard, so I'm not going to say it. I've been trying really hard not to. But, you know, based on the type of person who's doing the collection call, you can gear the customers that they're going to be seeing based on that list number. And they can deal with the customers that, you know, that deal with relationships as opposed to a corporate monster and stuff like that. So again, it gives you a lot of flexibility, okay? Don't fall into the analysis paralysis if you're going to go down this process and try and come up with 1,000 different list numbers, because that's not going to work for you either. You're going to forget those. Things that are, you know, I've seen that are kind of useful are, you know, weekly 1, weekly 2, weekly 3. Okay, and that 1, 2, 3 might be tied to an individual, and those are your weekly phone calls as opposed to monthlies. Or, as I mentioned earlier, these are my Friday 1, Friday 2, Friday 3. So every Friday I've got 3 individuals that are doing outbound phone calls, and they start with their list. They put in, you know, Friday 1, hit new list, and boom, here's who you're going to start making phone calls for. And, you know, if my Friday 1 person isn't in today, then Friday 2 picks up Friday 1 slack, okay? Because next week when Friday 2 is off, you know, Friday 1 has to do the reverse. the big thing associated with, you know, that these type of activities and tracking that in the system is the communication, is the ability to always go back and see what was done, not having notes written on a piece of paper that, you know, the next time you run that report, you're either going to have a stack of reports sitting there and you're going to have to keep flipping back through page and page. Okay, you know, what did I write this time? Oh, now let me go back last month when I ran the age trial balance. Let me see what I wrote on the note there and stuff like that. So this keeps everything in the system, and it's just a living, breathing this document until you complete that process, and then it's a historical document. And again, you know, it can be used for, you know, future decisions with that customer. Am I going to put that customer on hold? Is this something where, you know, maybe I'm going to be a little bit easier? Yes, I do have to call him, but he does eventually pay, et cetera, et cetera. We went through a bunch of the different inquiries and things like that, as well as the different types of reports, those things that I think kind of make sense. And again, the notes and things like that are just saved in the database. So you can generate reports on there. You know, reports are essential. They're not going anywhere. You need them to, you know, you got to get the job done. And a lot of times you want to be able to see across all the accounts. The same thing happens with your vendors. You want to see across all the payment terms and stuff like that, what's out there for on the payment side. But a report gives you that broad view where the inquiries really kind of focus on, let me dive into a particular account and drill into the details that way. So one is more broad focused, whereas the inquiry in my mind is more customer or account focused. Okay. There's, like I said, there's a slew of reports out there. We are going to be going in and I'm going to put together kind of a document associated with reports by functional area across the system. And I think I'm going to set up another one of these kinds of sessions to go through reporting functions, to go through the VTR generator, to go through how you can manipulate existing reports, save them as a custom report for yourself, write new reports, things like that. I'm probably not going to drive into the database, creating new database views and things like that for reporting purposes. I'll leave that for a support ticket, but giving you some of those functions. And another thing that I was kind of thinking might be worthwhile is to step through the financial report generator, which is different than the regular VTR generator. It is, that takes a little bit more work to deal with, but it's a way of generating, you know, your financials within the system. It might be a way of, you know, if you're using an outside accountant or something like that, you know, it might create the pretty reports and things like that, but this is something that you can do within the system. So you have a view internally, for example. So those are kind of the functions that I'm thinking about here. So let's see, kind of scrolling through some of the items on here. The notes in the customer feedback module can display in the AR inquiry screen. Those are just flagged as a feedback. And then when you double click on that, you'll see the details of the feedback side. So sometimes it's called customer feedback and sometimes it's called procedure feedback. The procedure feedback, just FYI, can also be a command button inside point of sale or sales order entry. We have a hard time reviewing balance history for an account, for example, finding a high balance and low balance, running balance on our AR inquiry screens. There's You do have an option to have running balances displayed inside the inquiry screens. There is also, I thought I had that displayed up here as well, where you can include the high balance. Maybe I'll put it in cash posted instead. Sorry, let me just kind of jump around a little bit. I thought I had gone in and put in high balance and things like that. Those are a couple fields that we can add to the display. I thought I had that set, but apparently I don't. But we can go in, we can add that onto the system itself. And the payment audit report, what is that called? And let's actually do this the easy way. The payment audit report is not actually a load report, it's an actual form. So you cannot load that through the load report screen, but it can be added onto your menus, which is, just what it's called that way. So you can't get the payment audit report from load reports, but if you throw a support ticket in, if you don't have it on your menus, they can go ahead and add that option onto your menu for you. The finance charge report, that may be a form as well. No, I have a report called finance charge. So if you go to your load reports, I have something called finance charge. If it's something that you don't have, if you don't have that finance charge, I can send you the VTR for that. And these sessions here are being recorded, and after the fact, what will happen is Megan Turner gets the link with where these documents, like the spreadsheet, she'll get that and she'll forward that to me with all your questions on it. She also gets the recording. So if you want to have a recording, you can shoot me a message, or you can shoot a message to Megan Turner and she can forward the link to you. But these are being recorded as we're going. Okay, I will send you the finance charge report. So those are the kind of the questions that I've seen pop up here. And again, the mechanics of the screens that we've gone through are pretty straightforward. It doesn't really take a lot of, there's no real learning curve associated with that. It's just being comfortable with where the data is coming from. These are notes that are going against the customer. And, it's, again, I don't know how many times I've said communication between last week and this week, but sorry if you're sick of it and it's one of your, words you don't ever want to hear again. But anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for joining these sessions. I hope there's some areas that you can use within your organization. Again, these are areas that a lot of people don't use actively, and just trying to show you some of the other features that exist within Autopart that a lot of people don't know. And just kind of in general, if there are topics, areas that we should set up sessions like this that would be beneficial, please shoot those to me. And, we'll have someone try and put those together. I've been trying to take these sessions and focus on a topic or just kind of a concept, as opposed to, let's talk about accounts receivable. because that can go every which way, right? You know, from the cash posting, from doing credits, invoices, debit notes, all those things. So, you know, we tried to focus this just on those couple credit type, or I'm sorry, collection activities and things that are available within the system. But if there are areas that, you know, might be beneficial to go in, please let us know. And we'll see if we can set those up. And that's across the board, not just on the accounting side. You know, if there's operational issues and things like that, that we can put something together, that's great. Like I said, I think I'm going to put together a reporting process. And the reporting process that I'm envisioning is taking the standard set of reports and kind of categorizing those. A lot of times, you know, a bunch of the questions that came up here are, how do I find this report? What's it called? You know, you go to load reports and kind of hunt and peck. So I'm going to kind of go through and say, okay, here's a list of favorites, for example. And, you know, hopefully, you know, they work for you as is, but then I want to take it the next step and say, let's go through the report generator and how you can kind of configure these and customize those to your own use that works best for your organization, and save that as a one-off so it will not get stuffed on a subsequent software upgrade. All right. Last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time making a report that's just exactly the way you want it, and we put a new one in and we step on a report that you've customized. So I think that's an area that I'm going to go ahead and do. All right. So again, thank you very much. In any areas, please let me know that we might be able to put together future sessions. So thank you very much. Have a great day.